It's Beyond the Box Score on Fantasy Football Today, presented by BetMGM, the sportsbook born in Vegas. We've got advanced stats from simple people, Adam Azer, Jacob Gibbs, and Dan Schneier with a haircut. He just goes into the barbershop and says, hey, make me look exactly the same, only a little bit less hair. And they nailed it every time. What's up, guys? How we doing?
If it ain't broke, don't fix it. We're doing better, I would say. Look, it's tough to be a Giants fan. It's even tougher to have a Giants podcast at this point in time. I don't know how I'm going to go through and go forward with doing a film breakdown of that team week in and week out. But you know what? I tried to focus on other things today for Beyond the Box Score. Got to watch a lot of players. Can't say it made me feel that much more confident. I watched Drake London. I watched Kyle Pitts, and I watched that Falcons offense. I watched Dalton Kincaid and that Bills offense, but I did also get to watch J.K. Dobbins, so I'm excited to at least get to talk about one positive development there.
Yep, that's one of our big topics today. Our four big topics are the struggling tight ends, really bad week for tight ends, but really just a bad week for offense. One guy we should be buying low on right now, the backfield splits, and J.K. Dobbins is one of our big topics here. And Jacob, Rich Rebar, one of our buddies, he had a stat going into Monday Night Football. NFL teams averaged 186.9 passing yards per game, which is the fewest for week one in this century since 2000. And they're averaging 121.3 rushing yards per game, which is the second highest in week one since 2000. So it was gross. You called it wacky. You called it expletive wacky during our mic check. But,
well, I'll say this, which was interesting.
I'm going to Jacob here.
Oh.
You didn't even let Jacob talk. Jacob, what do you think about that? What do you think about Dan just trampling right there?
I'm used to it. It's he's got extra powers now as a producer and everything, and it's no surprise. Yeah, it was wacky, but also I think this is kind of the direction the NFL has been moving from a defensive meta standpoint and how to respond to what's been happening defensively. So not super surprised, and I don't know. I don't want to get too caught up in the grossness of this week because J.K. Dobbins, there was a lot of really cool stuff as well, freaking C.J. Stroud falling down and making that throw. He made so many cool throws. Yeah. Nico Collins is the man. There was a lot of Anthony Richardson, man. The Anthony Richardson throws. Anthony Richardson is going to be so fun. I don't know. I've got a lot of stuff that I'm excited to talk about. And Bryce Young, Kirk Cousins, all that is not on that list.
All right, good. I like the optimistic approach. A reminder, in week one of 2023, C.J. Stroud was 28 of 44 for 242 yards, no touchdowns. He scored 10.7 fantasy points. He was sacked 5 times.
There we go.
And in week 2, he scored 25.5 points and threw for 384 yards and 2 touchdowns. So things will get better. Week 1 tends to be a little sloppy. But
I'll say this about that.
Good. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to add one thing. We and Jacob made a great point about it. It's kind of the meta of where the defensive coordinators and the defenses have been shifting. And we thought it might start to happen where we get to the point where from an EPA standpoint, an expected points added standpoint, it might actually become more efficient to run the ball than pass the football. And I'm missing who I'm supposed to credit on this. I apologize from a tweet earlier, but we're getting rapidly close to that point, and it showed from week 1 where it actually might become more efficient to call a run than a pass in the NFL, which is seemingly impossible. But if defenses continue to play the way they are, it might continue to be a trend, which is interesting because, again, robust RB looked very strong in week 1. Jacob Gibbs, my boy Joe Mixon, looked unbelievable running behind that style of blocking scheme, which I
knew it. Didn't even get 5 minutes into the show. I knew it was coming.
You knew Mixon was coming. You knew Neighbors was coming. You knew Barkley was coming. But guess what? I mean, not Neighbors, Connor. But guess what? This is part of the idea. It's the anti-fragility. It looks good in week 1. These guys are running the football. They're healthy. But how long will that last? And that's part of why it's difficult to invest in the running backs early. But, man, we're getting to a point where it might be better to run than pass the football in the NFL.
Well, I mentioned many times during our position previews and then afterwards that if you looked at ADP, with 2023 being an exception, running backs were horrible in 2023. But ADP, you look at the top 12 wide receivers taken, the top 12 running backs taken. We've actually, in recent years, the last 5 years or 4 years, whatever it was, more success with running backs finishing in the top 12 than wide receivers. And so far, CeeDee Lamb had a bad game. Jamar Chase had a bad game. Justin Jefferson was okay. Amon-Ra St. Brown had one of his worst games. He was terrible. The running backs killed it in week 1. So let's see how. Obviously, Marvin Harrison was terrible, but the running backs killed it. And we will go to Amon-Ra St. Brown and his crew, the Detroit Lions, 26-20 winners over the Los Angeles Rams. Detroit had the ball for 29 minutes and 45 seconds, and the Rams had it for 34 minutes and 56 seconds. And that was with Detroit possessing the ball for the entirety of overtime, however long that lasted. But obviously, we have a lot of injuries in this game. And we have Puka Nacua, who has this knee injury, and there's no timetable right now. It may not be a long-term thing, or it could be. We'll find out. But also, they lost 2 offensive linemen. They lost Joe Noteboom and Steve Avila. Steve Avila may have a sprained MCL. Joe Noteboom left with an ankle injury. So just a rough day for the Rams, and they kind of gave a game away as well. From a waiver wire perspective, what would your interest level be in Demarcus Robinson, who's 8% rostered, and Tyler Johnson, who's 1% rostered? Both of them had 7 targets. Do you guys have a preference? And then I guess Colby Parkinson, 5% rostered. Let's say Puka Nacua is going to miss at least 3 games. Let's just say, hypothetically, he's going to miss at least 3 games. Jacob, who would you prioritize? How much of a priority would they be?
Parkinson was my favorite sleeper tight end this year. I don't think that the Puka injury necessarily changes a whole lot for him in terms of like how the target distribution will shake out, but I do think he's a strong play continuing going forward. I think both those receivers you brought up are interesting as well. I like Tyler Johnson and what he put on film at the college level. It hasn't translated as a pro so far, but like if ever there's a system that somebody like washes up in and then ends up reviving their career, it's McVay and the Rams. Like, so I could see that. And then Demarcus Robinson was legitimately good last year. Fantasy points, data, suites, average separation score, loved him. Jordan Rodriguez called him like one of the best players from camp this year. Like everything that we have seen from D-Rob is that he's getting better later into his career. I think they're both interesting. Robinson is the one I would prioritize of the 2.
Yeah, completely agree. Kind of looked at all the catches, all the targets. We all watched the game. Tyler Johnson's felt a little fluky. He had 79 yards, but he had a 63-yard gain on a short catch. He made a nice move, spun away, picked up 63 yards. So Robinson's pretty interesting, and hopefully it's nothing big for Puka. But if you heard some tapping, that was Dan Schneier in his tap shoes, just dancing on Cooper Kupp. His call, yeah, he loved Cooper Kupp. And he was pumped last night, I'm sure. But Cooper Kupp had 21 targets. I guess a little disappointing that he only had 110 yards on 21 targets. But, I mean, really, if Puka's out for a while, he could be wide receiver 1. But even if he's not out, you got to be pretty happy about Cooper Kupp.
Yeah, look, fantasy football, it's hard to identify the ways to find upside in your drafts. I think a lot of times people bank on a tried and true process for it, which is age, breakout factors from an analytics standpoint in the previous year. And sometimes it's a closed-minded way of looking at it because if somebody is a certain age, he can't be a breakout player. But Cooper Kupp had proven to be one of the best players overall in fantasy for 2 straight years, then was injured last year, playing through an injury, now is healthy and is back, at least in week 1, to being one of the best overall players in fantasy football. If Puka is out, that's only going to continue. I actually think Puka isn't going to hurt him either, just going to give him softer situations and better looks. Cooper Kupp, when healthy, is one of the best players in fantasy football within this system. If he has Matthew Stafford and the rapport they've built. And Matthew Stafford, I mean, my hat off. That's my main takeaway from watching that full game. Lions-Rams, one of the best games on the slate, and I really enjoyed it. Having a quarterback like that who can do what he did with the offensive line in the state that they were in, it's so freaking rare. When an offensive line performs like that, it usually derails an entire game plan. But his ability to get his team into the right checks pre-snap and to understand how defenses rotate post-snap, it makes all the difference in winning football and keeping the players involved in a fantasy game usable and rosterable and startable. So I'm still good with the Rams moving forward. Obviously, Kyren Williams we didn't get to, but there was a really promising first game performance for him as well.
Yeah, Kyren Williams. We can go to the Rams. We can finish with Kyren Williams. Look, he dominated the touches. Rams had the Lions had a great run defense last year, so this was a tough matchup for them. And 18 carries, 50 yards, that's not great, but like the punt return thing, we told you that don't even worry about that. Kyren Williams is the guy. And then for the Lions, obviously a disappointing game for Jared Goff, only 13.4 fantasy points. I think you got to give a lot of credit to the Rams defense. They played very well. But Jacob, what's a takeaway? Like, this was an interesting game, right? You had Gibbs getting the touchdown. Both the running backs got a touchdown. Montgomery did nothing until overtime. He had, what do you have in overtime? 5 carries, 45 yards, and a touchdown in overtime. St. Brown with a horrible game. Jamison Williams, baby. Huge game. 5 catches, 121 yards, and a touchdown on 9 targets. Anyway, your thoughts?
Jamison Williams has got to be the big takeaway. You guys seem to be right on that, which is exciting because he definitely changes the dynamic of Detroit's offense and what they can do. And it's just cool to see a talented player like break out in year 3. You don't want to just see these guys running wind sprints. They use him in a lot of different ways. I thought Matt Harmon brought up an interesting note about Williams' ability to read and beat zones and how that has improved. He really liked what he saw when he charted him last year. And so it's not just the speed as an outside perimeter guy who's like beating man coverage. He's able to like find those deep soft spots and zones and work the perimeters. And we saw that last night for sure. Get some catch and run as well. Pretty excited with him. I would not be panicking at all for Amon-Ra St. Brown or Sam Laporta. You guys thought, or at least Dan did, I think, thought that Laporta was the guy who might see his targets affected by Williams the most. And maybe that turns out to be true. I just think both guys, St. Brown and Laporta, are so good, and the offense is so good that I'm not worrying about it. And if anything were to happen to any of the other pieces in the offense, then they step into an even larger role. For what it's worth, that was the lowest target rate that Amon-Ra has seen in a game that he played over 3/4 of the snaps in his whole career, including his rookie season when he, was in a not the center piece of the offense. So that's definitely interesting. But I'm not overreacting to it yet.
I wish I had a little bit of time before this and we cram in all this film and all this analytics in a very short period of time to get this out on Monday at noon. But wish I had time to watch it on tape to see what the Rams did defensively from a schematic standpoint, because I was wildly impressed with their ability to play defense in that game without Aaron Donald. I thought they would take a step back, but I want to see, guys, if it was a situation where their game plan was devised to take away Amon-Ra St. Brown. Because if that's the case, what we saw is the Lions offense didn't look as crisp when you take away Amon-Ra St. Brown. And we know the NFL is a copycat league. So if they figured out a way to kind of throw the whole timing of the offense off by making it clear and, concise plan to take away Amon-Ra St. Brown, I'm curious what will happen moving forward. But I'm so excited for Jamison Williams because, he was possibility of being the number 2 receiver on a well-functioning, arguably the best offense, at least from a scoring standpoint last year in the NFL. And he was so good on tape in college, and he's finally playing at that level again. The double move on the deep route, his ability to sink his hips and then restart. It's a rare ability. He might be the most talented. I hate to say this because I love Amon-Ra St. Brown, but just from a pure raw talent standpoint, and he's not a better receiver, but from a raw talent standpoint, he might be the most talented player on this offense.
They've got some very talented players, and they're going to have to score a lot of touchdowns or they're going to be some disappointed people. But obviously, you want to see more touches from Jahmyr Gibbs for a guy that you took with a top 15 pick.
Yes.
But you get 4 catches, and that's pretty good. And again, they didn't have the ball that much. They only threw 28 passes in this game, which is kind of a theme this week. Like we were talking about it, right? Just bad passing performances. But all right, that's it for this game. All right.
One last note from the Rams side of things. Cooper Kupp was used as a pre-snap motion man 16 times. Jayden Reed was the only other player who was even in double digits with 10. He had 7 targets at the pre-snap motion man. So, they're really, really going out of their way to feature him. Obviously, he had 21 targets. But it's like, if that is the role, he wasn't efficient. He wasn't efficient in this game. And he wasn't very good with his non-pre-snap motion targets, which was something that concerned me a little bit last year. But it really doesn't matter if he's going to see that type of volume. He's just a PPR check.
Right. Yeah, I was watching. Yeah, I was watching that. Not only is he doing that, he's also blocking. I'm like, God, this guy is in the best shape. Unbelievable.
I wondered if they wouldn't have him do that as much this year to keep him healthy. But yeah,
they need it. If it's part of their system, they can't run that scheme without those 2 guys blocking. Puka as well, which is an issue for Puka clearly from a physicality standpoint.
I go to pee after one set of tennis, and I'm exhausted from the walk. Cooper Kupp.
Well, to be fair, you didn't take the best route to your bathroom.
No, I didn't. All right, listen, if you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, do what I did just this past weekend and use the bonus code FANTASY. Sign up and use the bonus code FANTASY, and you're going to get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. So here's what you do. You download the BetMGM app and you sign up using the bonus code FANTASY. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game. You'll receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure you use the bonus code FANTASY when you sign up on BetMGM. We're going to take a break. More news items, stat of the century, and more. And we'll get into the big topics, the snap shares, the film review. We'll tell you what we thought about Drake London, Marvin Harrison, coming up next.
You hear that? It's the steady pulse of the world's game that's turning fans into family and sports into passion. You hear that? It's the heartbeat of American soccer. The USL on CBS Sports Network.
So here are the news items, and some of it's going to be repetitive. Puka Nacua with the knee injury. We're waiting to hear on the severity there. They have Arizona next week, but then San Francisco. Arizona's not easy. At Arizona, San Francisco, at Chicago, Green Bay. Tough stretch here for the Rams. And they could be without two offensive linemen, Joe Noteboom and Steve Avila. So rough day for them. Jordan Love, we know, sprained MCL, could miss 3 to 6 weeks. Josh Allen's going to get his left hand checked out. Ken Walker said he's fine with the abdomen injury. Then you got the two tight ends, David Njoku, who may have a high ankle sprain, and Jake Ferguson, who actually might be able to play this week through a knee injury. So he got some good news. Might be too soon. We'll see, but it doesn't look like an extended absence for Jake Ferguson. One note on David Njoku. After he left the game, Jordan Akins had 3 catches for 27 yards on 4 targets, so he filled that role if you're in a deeper league or a tight end premium league. And also Jerry Jeudy caught a touchdown right after David Njoku went out. Njoku was actually pretty involved. That was the thing. He wasn't, you got to be careful with small samples. He was terrible with Deshaun Watson in 5 games last year with Watson, and he was pretty good in this one while he played. Garrett Bowles, left tackle for the Broncos. He left with an injury. Don't worry, they have the Steelers next week. They'll be fine. Carolina, terrible against the run last year, terrible against the run in week 1. And Derek Brown, starting defensive tackle, he might be out for the season with a knee injury. Yeah, tough. Ugh. I was saying, like, the Giants are the new Jets. You know, because my brother.
That's what I was saying too. It's so funny. I said the exact same thing. It's weird.
And my brother's a Jets fan. And I was like, we're the new Jets. And actually, the Panthers are worse, I think. So,
well, the Panthers are worse, but I can't even argue with that. Somehow they're not that. Whatever the Giants put out was not the worst.
Let's see. Jonah Williams for the Cardinals. He left with an injury. Jordan Addison, ankle. This is a big deal for the Bills. Their pass defense is going to be an issue. Teron Johnson, their best defensive back, he might have he was ruled out immediately. That's not usually a good sign. I think it was a forearm injury for Teron Johnson, so he could miss some time. I'll stop there. I think everything. Oh, here's some good stuff. Oh, the Buccaneers. They face the Lions next week. They lost 3 defensive backs. One of those guys was a special teams player, but a reserve defensive back. But the Bucs defensive backfield got wrecked in week 1 against Washington. How about this? This is from, I believe, the Associated Press. In the Super Bowl era, teams that scored 0 touchdowns, 0 offensive touchdowns, and trailed by 17 or more points are 3 and 1,225. 3 wins to 1,225 losses when you don't score an offensive touchdown and you trail by 17 or more points. Who did that yesterday and won? The Chicago Bears over the Tennessee.
Wow.
Team. Yeah. Amazing. And this is from ESPN, I believe. Sorry, I should have cited it. The Bears are the first team in NFL history to win a game in which they trailed by at least 17 points and had fewer than 150 total yards. And then the stat of the century that I teased earlier, Daniel Jones has thrown more pick sixes than touchdown passes since signing his contract 2 off seasons ago. He's thrown more touchdowns to the wrong team. It's unbelievable.
Unbelievable statistic.
Okay, I've got snap count stuff. Jacob, do you have snap count stuff, Dan, or do you want me to go through it?
It's all you.
I'll let you go through it, but you should also at some point address Gamer Eric's comment. You are welcome on the show at any point.
Gamer who?
Gamer Eric.
Gamer Eric. Why am I not on the Big Blue Banter podcast? I should. I will go on. Absolutely.
Okay, I need to have you post game for a 10-minute venting segment the next time something crazy like yesterday happens.
Okay, I'll see you next week. George Pickens only played 68% of the snaps, and Van Jefferson and Pat Freiermuth slightly more, around 73%. Pickens, what'd you make of that, Jacob?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I was muted. I hate it. It's Arthur Smith. I just don't want to give any brain power to it. Pickens is good. he clearly looked good again, even with Fields, even with a weirdly limited role. We'll see if this changes going forward, and we'll let you guys know if it does.
But I will say this, it is alarming because it's not like in the past when Arthur Smith has been called out on this type of stuff, things have changed. It's remained the same. He's very stubborn, he's strict, he's rigid, and he will run the offense the way he's going to run this offense. So I'm definitely concerned about this moving forward.
Buffalo wide receivers, their snap shares. Keon Coleman, 73%. Mac Hollins, 58%. Khalil Shakir, mostly out of the slot, 53%. Curtis Samuel, 27%. MVS, 21%. Bijan Robinson played 89% of the snaps. That was great. DeAndre Swift played 39 snaps. Khalil Herbert played 6 snaps. Travis Homer and DeAndre Swift split third down. So I know it was a horrible day for the Bears offense, but I do think there's a silver lining for DeAndre Swift. He was the third down back, and he absolutely dominated carries. Short yardage, don't know. But Swift at least... No, he wasn't the third down back. He split the third down role, but dominated carries. Gerald Everett played 7 more snaps than Cole Kmet. Miles Sanders outsnapped Chuba Hubbard in the first half. I thought maybe this was just a blowout thing, but even in the first half, he played 2 more snaps, Miles Sanders. Evan Ingram, 68% of the snaps, Jacob. That was really low, and he had a horrible game. Concerns about Evan Ingram?
No, not really. I think he's going to be pretty involved in the offense. Do you have any, Dan?
No, I don't think that's an issue for him moving forward. I mean, look, we knew that he wasn't going to get the target share he got last year. A lot of that was dependent on the players around him. The issue, I think, for him is going to be, can he convert some of these red zone opportunities into scores? I thought based on the preseason, he was becoming a bigger focal point in that offense. But when Brian Thomas makes the plays that he makes in the red zone, it's going to be tough for him not to be that first read in that main option moving forward.
All right, that's Evan Ingram. Malik Neighbors and Drake London played every snap. Alexander Madison played 13 more snaps than Zamir White, including 6 more snaps in the first half. This was really more of a passing downs thing. I mean, Zamir White's just coming off the field on passing downs. Tyler Lockett played only 54% of the snaps, and he crushed Metcalf and JSN, but those guys played 79% or more. Lockett played only 54% of the snaps. It's
really the first time we've seen Jason get this role where he gets to play in 2 receiver sets. So we'll see if the offense is better going forward. It's interesting.
This is what Joe Biscaglia of The Athletic said, beat writer for the Bills.
Mm-hmm.
What should hold is Dalton Kincaid being out there in a full-time role. He's a potential difference maker. More productive days are likely ahead for Dalton Kincaid. He was not worried about, because I guess early in the game, it was a lot of knocks. And then Knox stayed on the field, but Kincaid never left the field, basically.
That was one of the players I got to focus on film, so I watched him. I thought he looked good running his routes. I think, and this is, it's a little bit truther, it's a little bit conspiracy theory, and some might say, but I'm a big wind truther. And from everything I've gathered from this game, the wind played a major factor in this from a passing standpoint. I think it's why we saw what we saw from Kyler and what we saw from Josh Allen. When the wind is that bad, it is very difficult to get a passing game going, and it could impact how we view things. It's 1 week sample size. I'm willing to give them both a pass based on it.
And if there's anyone who knows anything about wind, it's the guy who ate the entire Jersey Shore sandwich, the chicken cutlet with the vodka sauce, the ravioli, the cheese, and the garlic bread.
I thought you were going to say it's me because that was the excuse you were using for getting whooped 6-2-6-0. It was the wind. It was a windy day, but no, you didn't go there.
I just said that.
Nah, you didn't go there.
Brian Robinson and Austin Eckler played about the same amount of snaps. So that was interesting. Yet Robinson had 15 touches and Eckler had 6. Okay. Let's get some advanced stats. Jacob, fire away. What do you got for us?
So first I want to focus on some team level stuff like pace. Washington played super fast like we expected under Cliff Kingsbury. The offense was dysfunctional. I watched all of Jaden Daniels' dropbacks, and it's literally only one time did I see him make like a full field read. Every other time it's like one read, get it out quick. And part of that is they're playing a super blitz heavy defense. But also this is what we saw in the preseason, and it's kind of what we saw at LSU. I'm curious if you guys have any opinions on that, like from watching him in college. Does that track?
That tracks entirely with what his stats from college are. So I don't know. I didn't get a chance to watch him versus the Bucs, but I know that he was pressured more than almost any quarterback, which is exactly what Todd Bowles did against Daniel Jones in his first career start. It's kind of his game plan.
Over 80% of his yards came after the catch. It was just a lot of quick stuff. And yeah, he was bailing on plays to scramble all the time. I don't know how functional it's going to be going forward. But the fact that they're playing so fast does leave room for upside if he can figure it out, if the offense can figure it out. I would put it at like less than 10, 15% confidence in like Kingsbury and this rookie quarterback producing a good offense. But if they do, then like Terry McLaurin might not be dead. I know it was a frustrating week 1 for him, but he's the clear wide receiver 1 out there, and I think they're going to give some more design looks to him going forward. Luke McCaffrey is the other guy I would bring up. He actually played a lot for a rookie. He was out there quite a bit, even playing in some 2 receiver sets, the primary slot guy for Washington. The other rookie that really surprised me in terms of playing time was Ladd McConkey. Ladd McConkey was out there quite a bit. Josh Palmer was the clear wide receiver 1. He didn't get very many opportunities, Palmer, but McConkey, I think he ended up leading the team in targets. They were using him in pre-snap motion. He was the primary slot guy, and he was staying on the field in 2 receiver sets. So that touchdown was so cool, man. Like that's obviously super, super exciting. He's like,
no DJ Chark for at least 3 more games. So
yeah, I think he's probably the biggest riser to me of these rookies, at least, if not like any wide receiver.
Really?
After week 1.
So yeah. Great of a game. It's 5 catches, 39 yards, and a touchdown on 7 targets. He did lead them in targets, though. So that is accurate.
Yeah.
That's
and like if they're
Worthy and
so I'm pretty worried about Worthy, actually. I don't want to get carried away here because the role could change and Marquise Brown is back, but over 40% of his routes were go routes, Xavier Worthy. And if you look at players, I want to bring up him and Marvin Harrison Jr. next to each other. If you look at players who run even over 30% of their routes as go routes, they just don't get targeted. The highest PPR score of any receiver to do that over the past 5 years is George Pickens last year. He was a wide receiver 30. And so that's not a good note for Worthy. His rate was over 40%. In the preseason, it was over 40%.
What was this? What was the over how many they don't do well?
Over 30% of the routes are go routes. There's like a list of like 25 receivers, and none of them have ever done anything. None of them have ever drawn a target on over 21% of their routes. It's really hard. Go routes are fine for fantasy, but it's hard if you're running a ton of go routes to draw consistent targets. Obviously, he has Patrick Mahomes, and so big plays could come at any time. But like if you could sell him for somebody who you feel confident in, I think that is valid. I wouldn't necessarily do that in Dynasty. And again, the role could change when we see Hollywood Brown come back. Maybe he takes some of those. I was just hoping we would see more designed looks for Worthy, more pre-snap motion stuff, get the ball in his hands. I think that's actually where he's better. I think he's good at tracking the ball, but I think he's probably at his best, like getting the ball in his hands and letting him create a little bit in space. So Marvin Harrison Jr., I don't know his go route rate, but I do know that his average route depth was over 12 yards. So the average distance from the line of scrimmage on average where his initial cut in his route came was 12 yards down the field. That's crazy. Yeah. Last year, Jameson Williams and Justin Watson had the highest average route depths at like 11.4, 11.6 yards. It's really, really hard to get targets when you're running that kind of a route tree. I went back. You can watch all his routes on my Twitter. I went back and watched all of them. Kyler isn't even looking at him for most of them. And a lot of them, it's taking him so long to even complete his route that it's like, no, there's no chance that he's getting a target on this play. Also, I thought he looked slow. I don't want to overreact to that, but I watched him and it did not feel like I was watching Brian Thomas Jr. or even Adonai Mitchell or anything. And I know he's not the same level of athlete as those guys, but it's like, we didn't get to see him run in the combine. And then he comes in and looks like this. And like, yeah, that's kind of alarming. What do you guys think on MHJ?
Yeah, I'm not as alarmed by the running side of it. I never really thought he was going to be that fast of an athlete, but I will say this. It's like, it depends kind of how they use him, because I think for him to operate at his best, he's isolated as a boundary receiver, Jacob, and has the ability to run double moves and to run back shoulders and to kind of have a complete, I don't want to say like be the complete focal point of offense, but at least be somebody who the defenses have to worry about, again, a back shoulder or breaking inside or running a route that he can break off the stem at any point. If he's just running those go routes, it takes away a lot of what he's able to do as a receiver and what makes him so special. Because he's not, like you said, a freak athlete. He's just not. And those are the types of guys that you can run on those like vertical routes the whole game. So I'm a little concerned from that standpoint. But again, I look at this game and I really wish I was there to know fully. But I think the wind was playing a big factor in the game plan for both quarterbacks.
I was hoping to see him used more like Amari Cooper, like similar type of offensive
Okay.
designer, and I didn't see hardly anything other than downfield stuff, and hopefully that develops over time. It could be the wind, it could be also the matchup against Buffalo. They're an umbrella zone defense that kind of
Yes,
follows
yes.
everything short, and that's what we saw with Arizona's passing distribution. So I
But
wouldn't.
the thing is that the problem with that is he still should be able to win in that style of against that style of defense because was still a great route. It was great on the in breakers at college. He's great on the back shoulders. He wins at the catch point. So that's the bigger issue. Like, is that not part of their plan?
It didn't look like it.
Well, let me just also give this context here. Kyler Murray this is according to ESPN stats and information, did not complete a single pass thrown 10 or more yards downfield.
Yeah.
And also I looked this up. He threw 41.9% of his passes to wide receivers. That was the 5th lowest mark of his career.
Wow.
Okay, 42% to wide receivers, but his 3 lowest wide receiver target rates were all in December of last season. So 4 of his 5 lowest have come under this coaching staff. That's wide receiver target rate. Now, last year, I'm pretty sure Marquise Brown was out at that point. They had Greg Dortch and Trey McBride basically was getting all the targets. But, it's something to watch. Not going to make.
I'll say this, considering Marvin Harrison with juniors, I was in 23 leagues this year, which is crazy. The biggest number in my life. A lot of them auctions. I didn't draft Marvin Harrison Jr. anywhere. His price tag never made any sense to me. I thought the community overinflated him and he never should have been drafted in the range he was going drafted in. But what are we expecting from him? I think it's time to adjust our expectations. This is a run first offense that wants to run the football. That's how the scheme's based on. Kyler Murray's never been a really good passer. I know he supported Hopkins that one year, but a lot of that was just playing in Kingsbury's system and a lot of these dumb quick routes that we're not going to see this year because the Petsig system is different. Harrison's a very talented player, but this is not really, we priced him up and juiced him up to this spot where he's not really in a high flying passing offense. So I just don't know. I feel like the expectation has to be greatly changed for him and then we'll be fine.
I don't know. I mean, I think, first of all, it's okay to have high expectations for stud wide receivers if you think they're stud wide receivers.
They need the quarterback too, and they need the passing offense.
He's a good enough quarterback, and he did do it with
by reputation,
DeAndre Hopkins, and he did it in 2 years. Well, I mean, he's good enough.
The Hopkins stuff was not a lot of explosive plays. It was not a lot of, intermediate passes, long passes. A lot of just Cliff Kingsbury's system, giving him a million targets and him just hitting slants and quick in breakers. But that doesn't seem to be, as Jacob said, the case right now.
1,400 yards.
On how many targets and how many receptions?
160 targets.
Right, 160 targets. Do we see Marvin Harrison coming anywhere close to 160 targets?
Oh, yeah, I would have thought so.
Okay, so that I always felt was overrated. I don't think this is the type of offense that's supporting that by any means.
I would have thought, 140, 150. I wouldn't have thought.
I just don't, not with this style of offense.
I had a hard time getting him there as somebody who does the projections, just because of the number of passing attempts in Arizona, and then also the role that he's playing. I was worried he would be doing so much of this vertical stuff that it'd be really hard for him to push above 23 or 24% target share. And if week 1 is any indication, that definitely looks like the case.
It'll change, we hope.
So then who are we putting ahead of him? You take Cooper Kupp ahead of him?
Yeah.
Obviously. I was doing that already.
But all the guys behind him, Olave, London, they struggled. Would you take Jalen Waddle over him? Would you take Nico?
Yeah, Waddle for sure.
Nico for
sure. These are guys in good offenses that pass the ball a lot.
I think you could take Olave ahead of him too. New Orleans was dead last year in play action and pre-snap motion. They were first in pre-snap motion and third in play action in week 1. New offensive coordinator. This is something we speculated might happen. Those are passing game efficiency boosters. In a more neutral game script, I think Olave is going to crush.
And okay, I
have one note too on something Jacob said earlier. Just a quick note.
Go ahead.
I want to have a little bit more faith. I'm sorry, Adam. Just a quick note in Jaden Daniels and McLaurin moving forward because they came inches away from connecting on a deep touchdown that would have been 65 yards. And I just think that's more of a timing based thing. They need more reps together and the chemistry will come down. And I think it'll come. I was actually very enthused by Jaden Daniels in general from a fantasy standpoint because they're going to run him in the red zone and he's going to run a lot. So all he has to do is hit a few pass plays a game and stay healthy, basically.
I was strictly talking about a real life.
No, I know.
We don't have any real life offenses that function the way that they're trying to do it.
Yeah, you're right. And that's been the case with Kingsbury. I don't know why he keeps getting jobs, but he does.
Look, the thing is, they missed barely on a 70-yard touchdown, McLaurin and Daniels, but there are so many missed deep balls in the NFL, right? I
But
mean,
some of them I think are, I just am feeling like this is their first few reps together throwing that live game.
he's supposed to be good at this. And that was why I
Yeah.
liked McLaurin, because all his career basically has been quarterbacks who can't throw deep. He's had
Right.
horrible deep ball accuracy in his career. And I thought this would be a boost to him. It almost was. All right, Jacobs, what else you got?
Jalen McMillan was somebody that we were tracking this preseason. Really liked him. I thought he looked great. He only had 3 targets, but did have what could have been a touchdown. That was a defensive pass interference. Did end up getting in the end zone on his first ever reception. That was cool. And he played a ton. He actually ran more routes than both Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. So he's going to be out there a lot, and that's exciting. Adonai Mitchell played a ton for the Colts. I'm excited to get back and watch him because he looked so explosive this preseason. Obviously
Two deep balls overthrown.
Yeah.
What are we talking about?
Yeah. So obviously that was the case, that he's that kind of an athlete, but I just didn't realize how apparent it might be even against NFL competition. So I'm really excited to watch his routes. On the negative side of things, the Titans didn't use any motion, and I thought that they might. They in the preseason it looked like they were going to. I thought it makes sense with the coaching change that might be the case, but they were the 3rd lowest, and Calvin Ridley wasn't used in motion a single time, and obviously Will Levis looked really bad.
Yep.
I watched the Bears, and I think that I watched every drawback for the Bears, and I think things could get better. Roma Dunze ran a ton of routes. They were using all 3 receivers. Keenan Allen saw a ton of targets. So either one of those guys, I'm not giving up on. DJ Moore, I feel fine about it. I think that they'll play better. It was the first game. Caleb Williams seriously had 6 or 7 passes tipped at the line of scrimmage. There was just a lot of stuff that contributed to the really bad end result. And I think Tennessee's defense is legit. I think they have a chance to be a top 10 defense this year.
Yep. Yeah, we talked about that.
I like that call. Sorry,
all right,
go ahead.
No, I just want to move the show along because we got to get to our big topics here.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about Drake London, guys, and the Falcons? And let's do that. We're going to take a break. When we come back, Drake London, 2 catches for 15 yards on 3 targets. Kirk Cousins, 83% rostered, scored 8.2 fantasy points against the Steelers. Was obviously under duress a lot, but also looked terrible. He said it. His coach said it. Everyone knows he had a horrible game. And we'll talk about the Falcons after this break on Beyond the Box Score on Fantasy Football Today.
Football action continues. Are you ready for this? Ready to take chances? As the gridiron is taken over by the Great White North. It's time to storm the fortress. It's time to fight on the battlefield. Catch the Canadian Football League on CBS Sports Network.
So let's talk about Drake London. 2 catches for 15 yards on 3 targets against the Steelers. Yes, he was more or less shadowed by Joey Porter. He saw a lot of Joey Porter. Kirk Cousins didn't really see a lot of Drake London. I don't remember saying it seemed like Kyler Murray didn't even see Marvin Harrison. Kind of felt like Kirk Cousins was just getting rid of this. Blow the whistle, just getting rid of the ball. But what did you guys see here? What's the concern level for Drake London, Dan?
I'm very concerned for not just Drake London, but anyone but Bijan Robinson in this offense right now. I am confused, I guess I would say, at what's going on with Atlanta, because we looked at the numbers, and I think I have them right here, but Kirk Cousins, I'm actually not positive I have it now. Yeah, here it is. The Falcons ran exactly 1 offensive play with Kirk Cousins under center yesterday per Next Gen Stats. The rest of them, 26 out of pistol, 22 out of shotgun. Atlanta gained only 6 total yards out of pistol formations. Both of those formations do not have a quarterback under center. I don't really understand why they're playing Kirk Cousins if he's this not recovered yet from his injury. I'm very concerned. There was a throw where he just didn't plant at all on his plant foot to drive into the throw, and it went really short on one of those 4th downs. It looked really alarming. We remember from last season when Joe Burrow was playing through the calf injury, the Bengals offense was a shell of itself because they couldn't put him under center and have him operate an under center game. If you are limited to only running shotgun or pistol, it is very easy for a defensive coordinator to scheme against you. It doesn't matter who you are. I don't really understand what's going on in Atlanta. I don't understand how Cousins could look the way he did yesterday, and I actually got a chance to watch that. Again, can't really drive off the plant foot. and still play. I understand the optics of it. Look, if you're Atlanta, you just sign him to a contract. You can't play Penix early because if Penix is good, you're kind of screwed in that regard. So you kind of just have to throw him out there into the mix. It's a weird like politics type situation, but is a week going to get him back to the point where he feels like he can plant off that foot and play and go under center? If not, what's going to happen here? Like, how is the passing game going to generate anything?
I don't think I want to start him this week at Philadelphia. I'm talking about London. I'm obviously not starting
Cousins.
Hey, London, this seems like a good matchup. You know, certainly it was a great matchup last year for wide receivers. It was great in week 1 with the Packers receivers. I'm nervous about it. I only have London in one team. I'm not going to even look to see who my other options are, but just the advice I'm going to give is probably based on what Dan said, probably to sit him because it looks like Drake London has a bad quarterback situation once again. Jacob, where are you at on this?
Yeah, I'm kind of with you, and I am with Dan. I don't understand why Cousins is playing if this is where he's at. You know, if you draft Penix and you think he looks good enough in the preseason that you sit him, then I don't know. I guess they're just worried that he would take the job if he plays well.
Yeah,
but it's like,
that's what they're worried about.
Isn't that a good thing? I don't know. I don't understand it.
To us, yes. To NFL politics, no.
Yeah, you got to work. You got to make sure you're saying Penix. You know.
Yeah, my bad. The next 2 matchups are not good ones. Yeah, I don't know. I hate this for Kirk because he's one of my favorites. And he's probably going to get embarrassed these next 2 matchups too.
Yeah, look, I try not to overreact, but we'll see. Drake London's got to prove something for sure. I watched Courtland Sutton. I wanted to see what that was all about. 12 targets, 4 catches for 38 yards. He had 1 end zone target. He basically had 2 end zone targets, and one was like right near the goal line. One was an interception. One was thrown into double coverage. Bo Nix threw 2 interceptions trying to force the ball to Courtland Sutton. But also there were some encouraging things for Sutton. You know, I wouldn't necessarily run away from him. He got so many targets, and there were some plays that could have been made. A couple of missed throws.
I think this is going to be his role, and he's not going to play Reek Woolen every week. Reek Woolen is like, It's like him, Joey Porter. Like those are the kind of guys who are perfectly suited to match up against Courtland Sutton. Yeah, I would be buying.
I don't know if I'm buying because Bo Nix was horrible, but I'm not. Hey, you drafted Sutton to be a bench player. I think he's perfectly fine to throw in there as a bye week replacement. And if he keeps getting this kind of target share, I don't know if he's going to get 12 a week, but then he could be a good number 3 receiver.
I think he'll have a really good shot too once they go to Jarrett Stidham. I really think it's a matter of when, not if. There, yeah, I don't see. I mean, I know they drafted him,
and they're going to draft a guy in the first round.
I think it'll. And that shows how much. Yes, because right, and so it's almost impossible to do based on what you just laid out, the politics of it. And yet, I think Nix will be that bad that they'll be forced to do it. He only had 2 throws that traveled any distance yesterday. They were both horrific. He can't move the ball. Defenses are going to continue to clamp down on him. They're going to continue to play no respect. They're going to leave the field side open. They're going to rotate safeties down on a consistent basis, and it's going to get really ugly really fast in Denver. Again, it'll be a situation where it's like, oh, we need to give him a break. He's getting hit a lot. Like,
okay.
But I just see it happening. I think it'll help him. And the other thing is Levis, man. You know where I was at on Levis all throughout his career, Adam. I did the famous show with you where I told you all his game logs from his last season in Kentucky. He was throwing for like 170 at the collegiate level on a consistent basis. He's Daniel Jones, but with a bigger arm and less speed as a runner. That means he can't operate a drop back passing game. He can't keep the offense in rhythm. He can't keep the offense on time. And I'm happy I have basically no shares of any Titans, despite all the hype they had this offseason.
Oh, maybe Tony Pollard, though, could be good. But Deshaun Watson finished 0 of 9 on passes thrown 15 or more yards downfield and averaged 2.6 air yards per completion, the lowest mark of his career. That is from ESPN.
Watson's so bad. It's crazy.
Deshaun Watson's stat. He took 17 hits yesterday. QB hits are tracked by PFF. That was the most since 2006.
Yeah, I did. Look, this guy's not a good quarterback, but like I said yesterday, you play the Cowboys without both of your starting offensive tackles.
Right.
You're in trouble. So he's not good. But he's not this bad. He's
not this bad, but they're I guess financially tied to just playing him the whole year. I think.
They are financially tied, but they also want to win, and Jameis Winston is there as a potential backup.
It's ugly though. Like there was a route, or did you see the route Cooper ran near the red zone toward the end of the game where he just ran one of his like classic, beautifully smooth double moves and was like 7 yards open, and Watson just sailed it.
Watson
No,
got drilled off that.
He got hit. He got hit.
That one, he didn't sail that one. It was like right off his fingertips. I thought Cooper should have had that.
I know, but when you're that open, you need to put air under the ball, and it should be a walk-in TD. It shouldn't be just over your fingers like that, in my
It
opinion.
was one throw to the sideline, a deep ball to the sideline that he threw.
Oh, that was really ugly.
Into the side.
Yeah.
And then I looked at all of Devon Achan's catches. He had 7 catches, and to me, it looked like he was the first read on 3 or 4 of them. So, there were a couple where it was like looked like they were looking one way but setting up something else. I think it was design screen, but they were definitely intent to get Devon Achan the ball in space, and he's so good at that. And I know I made Jacob very happy. He's a big Achan guy. So let's get to our 4 big topics, and we'll speed through them a little bit here, guys. Zach wants to know, who is one guy you should be buying low on right now?
Jonathan Taylor. I think if you could turn like Joe Mixon into Jonathan Taylor, if you could turn like Tony Pollard and a little bit extra into Jonathan Taylor, I would definitely do that. He handled all of the running back rushes, almost played the whole game, basically. And I was pretty encouraged. I think that was a really brutal matchup for Indy in terms of their pass game and like their offensive line, how they matched up against the pass rushers and everything. And still, they looked okay. Like Richardson looked a little bit better than I thought he would. It's going to be consistent, but I think JT looked really good from a setup, an offensive environment setup.
Yeah, for me, that one guy we talked about him a little bit earlier, but it is Dalton Kincaid. I still think that passing offense will look a lot better than it did this week, and he'll be the main benefactor of it.
And I'll say Joe Burrow. I think this is a very obvious one, but there are people that are just kind of down on Higgins, for example. It might take some time, but like this was obviously not Jamar Chase playing through food poisoning the day before, and also we know the situation. So Burrow gets the Chiefs this week. That could be rough. After that, he's going to just start destroying people, I think. So I'd say Burrow, and then I think also Trey McBride, which brings us to our next one from Fat Pete. Was this the right year to wait on tight end or just a rough week 1? And I would say, honestly, it's not like the late round tight ends were good. Almost no tight ends were good. Would you start Foster Morrow? I don't think so. But Mark Andrews, 14 yards. Travis Kelce, 34 yards. Trey McBride, 30 yards. Kyle Pitts, 26 yards and a touchdown. Kincaid, 11 yards, I believe, right? What did he have? Yep, one for 11 yards. Sam Laporta, a huge game by comparison, for 45 yards. So it was rough. The graphic you're looking at here doesn't include Kyle Pitts, but yeah, he was wide open in the end zone. It's not like he had a very encouraging game. He had 3 targets. So, Jacob, I'll give you the first word. Was this the right year to wait on tight end or just a rough week 1?
It was definitely a rough week 1. It might have been the right year to wait if these guys aren't actually going to be like featured in their offenses. I think Trey McBride is the one who like truly was featured. And so I'm not as worried about him. Like we've talked about already with Marvin Harrison Jr. It seems like maybe Kyler, his preference is more of like these quicker, shorter reads, although he held onto the ball like crazy in this game.
Yeah.
He was frustrating me, man. But yeah, McBride from a role standpoint looked good. I think Laporta from a talent standpoint I'm not worried about him at all, and his offense is really good. I'm a little bit worried about Mark Andrews because last year Todd Monken used him a lot more around the line of scrimmage, like a Travis Kelce type of player, and that's what I thought he might be, is like an offensive centerpiece for them. He was used down the field a lot more, whereas Likely was doing that kind of stuff for them. And if that's going to be the role, man, their offensive line looked bad. It was a tough matchup against the Chiefs, but they were like working around their offensive line, which is something we saw. That's something we're seeing from a lot of offenses. Like the Seahawks did that. I don't want to get us off track here, but like there are a lot of offenses that are doing that, and there's a lot of defenses that look really good. And it's like, man, we might keep having these problems. For what it's worth, Andrews wasn't used a lot as a pass blocker. People have been, saying like he's their 6th offensive lineman. He only had 2 snaps as a pass blocker in the game. But yeah, if he is working down the field a lot, I just don't know if Lamar's going to have the time to find him. Not really worried about Kelce at all. Kincaid, I don't know. I'm glad that you watched him and have some level of optimism, but like to me, this is the best matchup possible on paper, and this is what we got. I don't understand why he wasn't a bigger part of the game. Joe Brady runs the crap out of the ball, man. Joe Brady has a decent sample size of coaching, and he has more rushing touchdowns than passing touchdowns within that sample size. That's insane. No one does that. No one does that in the NFL. I'm pretty worried about the passing game pieces. I think it's just going to be spread among all those guys. The playing time was there for Kincaid at least. And so there could still be a path to him being the guy that you drafted him to be, but you really need the targets to be there. And we'll see. I'm worried about the passing game.
I want to throw out a stat here. I want to give credit to Andy Holloway of the Footballers, who he said, I rewatched every snap that Mark Andrews was on the field on Thursday night. I was the lowest on our show on Andrews, so he went on, but he was talking, say, don't panic. And then Nathan Yonke, who I seem to quote all the time from PFF, said, after seeing this thread from Andy, decided to look at the data. Mark Andrews was double covered on a higher percentage of his routes in this game than any of his other games from 2021 to 2023. So a lot of double coverage for Andrews.
Interesting.
I'm honestly worried about all of them.
Yeah.
Just in the sense that I don't know, like Laporta worries me the least, but will we have a true standout tight end this year?
Why are we worried about McBride?
Well, because Marvin Harrison had one. How many targets did he have?
3, I think.
Yeah, that's why. Because it wasn't a great game for McBride. And, like, I'm not that worried about McBride, but Marvin Harrison's going to play a big role.
I think those targets come from Dortch. I don't really think he affects McBride that much.
Even at his best, though, last year, McBride had only 3 touchdowns. I don't ever see him really being a big touchdown guy based on my personal profile of him. So
I mean, he's a huge freak athlete stud tight end.
Big target he should be, but just hasn't been. But yeah, he should be. I just don't. Again, my big thing with that, Jacob, is this is not his fault, but I don't buy into Murray as much as others do. I think he has all the physical tools, and I think he has the flash plays on film that make you go, oh my God, he made that throw. He stuck it in that window with that kind of arm talent, but it's not consistent with him at all. And a big issue is just like Russ, these guys who don't use the middle of the field. For him, he can't see it, whatever it may be. It's just hard to operate an offense because that's the only place right now where the NFL is giving you. These defensive coordinators you have to be good and efficient at ripping intermediate shots on time in rhythm, or you can't run a passing game these days. And I just haven't seen that from Murray at any consistent basis anytime in his career. Kelsey scares me the most of these because I just don't think, and not scares me, I still think he'll be fine. But to what Adam said, like at one point this offseason, I was kind of like, well, maybe we'll look back and be like, why the hell were we letting Kelsey fall to round 3? But now I'm just like, I don't really think he's ever going to be that focal point he was for fantasy again. So it's like, well, I get it now.
Yeah, there will certainly be weeks where he is, but it will not be what it was, and they didn't even have Marquise Brown. Like I think we need that 5,000 yard 40 touchdown season. Right. I think from Mahomes for Kelsey to be great. I'm not sure that I feel all that differently about any of them in particular, except I just feel worse about the tight ends as a whole. Sure. And then for Andrews, like Isaiah Likely's good. He's really good. And Zay Flowers looks like the guy they really want to feature. We'll see how, squeaky wheel, right? Like Andrews is going to get his probably as soon as this week. But Zay Flowers is obviously going to be a big part of this. One encouraging thing is they were 15th in pass rate in week 1. And it's not like they were playing from behind the entire game or anything, but they're usually toward the bottom. So they look like a different Ravens offense. That's the only way that they can sustain this. But I think they give the ball to Derrick Henry a lot. I thought they were going to do that in week 1. I cannot understand. Stupidest game plan ever. Like you get ripped for not running the ball against the Chiefs in the playoffs, and then you barely give it to Derrick Henry. I don't know. It didn't make any sense to me. But anywho, I think there are concerning signs for all of these guys. Jamison Williams concerning for Laporta. Rashee Rice, Marquise Brown, Xavier Worthy concerning for Kelsey. Zay Flowers and Isaiah Likely concerning for Andrews. McBride, he's tight end 1 for me now. I don't know. He's tight end 2. Laporta's definitely tight end 1. Kincaid, do something. Kincaid's kind of like got a little bit of Drake London in him. We're projecting this big jump from him. He's never actually done it yet. Right. Kyle Pitts. We had all those concerns about London. We have him for Pitts. Yeah. George Kittle, please have a big game tonight. Please.
Brock Bowers season.
Brock Bowers season.
Yeah. The matchup was perfect for Bowers. They're like really, really zone heavy defense, the Chargers. So he just got a bunch of short targets.
All right. This one is from House. What are the backfield splits that we need to know about and what's to come?
I categorize them. So every down bell cows, Jonathan Taylor, Kyron Williams, Bijan Robinson, Saquon Barkley. These guys are basically the same thing, but they did give up a bit of situational usage, so probably third downs for most of them. Ramondre Stevenson, Joe Mixon, 33 touches. Jerome Ford, James Conner, DeAndre Swift, Tony Pollard, 93% third down snap rate for Tyjae Spears. That was basically his role. I thought they would rotate more, but it was much more situational. Derrick Henry got out snapped by Justice Hill. That's it, when they're losing, it's the same thing we saw in Tennessee. Brian Robinson, he actually was the clear lead guy on early downs. Next tier is clear lead backs, but another guy rotated in. It wasn't necessarily situational, so I could see these swinging one way or the other, especially the backfields that have a veteran and then a younger guy. Devin Singletary, Josh Jacobs, Rashad White, Travis Etienne, Kenneth Walker, Zach Moss, James Cook, Najee Harris, Aaron Jones, Javonte Williams, Alvin Kamara. Those were all clear lead backs, but there was another back that played a relevant role. Do you want to talk about any of them?
Don't really. I don't know that I agree with you on Walker and Kamara. I'm just curious because Walker left with an injury late, and then Kamara, it was garbage time when Jamal Williams got all his work.
I went and looked at it just to be sure, to split it by quarters, and his snap rate even in the second quarter was 60%. They're just not going to play Kamara all the time, I don't think.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, fair.
But I'm not worried about him losing to Jamal Williams or anything like that.
No,
where the other guys might actually lose touches.
Who are some of those guys again?
I could see Devin Singletary losing touches as the year goes on. I am a little bit. I'm not really worried about Josh Jacobs. Maybe if Marshawn Lloyd gets healthy, Rashad White could definitely lose touches. Bucky Irving looked good. Todd Bowles was talking him up after the game. We're here for that. Me and Dan for sure. Travis Etienne, I know Dan's here for that. Tank Bigsby looked great.
Oh yeah, Bigsby season.
You don't think Charbonnet could take work from Ken Walker at all?
Well, Walker gets hurt all the time. I mean, he gets hurt every year.
He played almost 80% of the snaps in the first half, Kenneth Walker. So, and he got a little bit banged up. So you might be right. He might be the clear that they talked him up like he might be a bell cow. That might be the case. Zach Moss had 3/4 of the carries in the backfield there. Chase Brown was kind of nothing. He just
makes the third down roll, right? And in the short and the goal line touchdown or the 5-yard touchdown, whatever. That was a huge development for Moss.
Yeah.
See, but it was big.
I think James Cook could lose work to Ray Davis potentially. I think Ray Davis really fits what they want to do there with all the man gap rushing. Not that Cook's bad at that, but Cook's just trying to bounce it outside a lot. Najee, I don't know what to expect in Pittsburgh. We need to see what's going to happen with Warren healthier, but Warren was outsnapped by Cordero Patterson. Patterson played almost a third of the snaps, which is what are we doing, man?
That has to be a health thing, right? I mean,
I think so, but I do think Cordero is going to play.
He is going to play.
Aaron Jones was the clear lead back. Ty Chandler just mixed in a little bit. And then Javonte Williams, it wasn't situational. It wasn't like McLaughlin was the third down guy. They just kind of rotated a little bit. I thought it might be that way where Javonte just didn't get very many route running opportunities and McLaughlin was the clear passing down guy, but they both played a decent amount. McLaughlin had a ton of opportunities and had 2 yards or something.
I just
fumble.
There was a lot of hype at the end of draft season for McLaughlin and for Javonte Williams. And I never got in, especially Javonte Williams. There was a lot of hype for him at the end. And I couldn't get on board with either of it because you're buying into one of the worst offenses in football. And it looks like it could be even worse than we expected with Bo Nix. So I just don't see the point of either of those players. I don't think I'd start either of them at any point. And I'd look to move on, but sell low on Javonte Williams.
It's a math thing. They're going to be PPR scammers. They played a Seahawks defense that is pretty aggressive. It's Mike McDaniel coming over from the Ravens, using a lot of man and press and stuff like that. So that's not necessarily a matchup where running backs get targeted quite as much. The running back target rate was 18%. Historically, with Sean Payton, it's been around 30%.
And I respect those stats. I respect the Sean Payton stats historically, and I saw that tweet you put out from Scott Barrett, but so much of that sample size was with Drew Brees at quarterback. I know some of it wasn't, but so much of it was.
Russell Wilson was never a guy who threw to his running backs, and last year they led the NFL in running
backs. I think they're going to throw to their running backs. It's not that. I was talking more about if the running backs will be successful fantasy options, because just getting targets for McLaughlin is not going to be enough, in my opinion. It might be enough for him to be a back-end flex or RB2 in desperate situations, but Javonte's path is even less clear to me. And I just think there were a lot of Sean Payton's running backs, always good in fantasy football, and I guess majority of that sample size was Drew Brees, a Hall of Fame quarterback.
I have to run. I'm sorry, guys. Let's do our last big topic here, and it's J.K. Dobbins. Joe Arnold wants to know, is J.K. Dobbins for real? Can I trust him rest of season? Dan, you're excited about this one. Not only did he have 10 carries for 135 yards and a touchdown, he also had 3 catches, and he ran 8 routes on third down. He was the only Chargers running back to run a route on third down. That's huge. Go ahead, talk about Dobbins, who gets the Carolina Panthers next week.
I watch every snap of J.K. Dobbins. It's fun because I think one of our first ever Beyond the Box Score shows, we broke down J.K. Dobbins against the Browns with the Ravens, and he had such a phenomenal game on tape that game. His processing, his understanding of where the blocks are going to be, the timing he displays in the running game, his ability to bounce. He wasn't that player in this game that he was on that tape of that Ravens game. And I think it's going to take him some time. He got kind of ran on his long run, on both of his long runs. I feel he kind of ran out a little bit of gas, and that's to be expected. Hasn't played a lot of football due to the injuries, but he is going to be one of the better processing backs and the best processing back in this offense. Like you said, he's the only one running routes. If he can stay healthy, we know one thing: Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman offenses can run the football successfully all the time, even when you know it's coming at you. And we saw that in this game. So again, Dobbins drafted at RB 32 or whatever it was. Gus was 27, and they were flipping back and forth. They're going to provide value.
32? I do not think so. They were lower than that.
Even lower, right? Sorry, it was like 37 and 42, whatever it was. It was really low.
Yeah.
Despite the whole time us knowing this will be one of the most successful run offenses in the NFL. So I'm in on J.K. Dobbins. I think he can be started next week in your RB2 spot, in your flex spot, and you can be excited about it.
Among qualified running backs, J.K. Dobbins was first in EPA per rush. Gus had the fourth lowest.
Wow.
J.K. Dobbins was fourth in avoided tackles. Gus had none. J.K. Dobbins had a 50% success rate. That was sixth. Gus was at 18%. Only Zamir White and Raheem Mostert were lower. On that note, I did want to mention that Zamir White and Alexander Mattison had an identical number of snaps on first downs.
Wow.
You saw Mattison catch the touchdown that was on first down.
Yeah.
He wasn't just playing on third downs. He played more snaps than Zamir White. I think it's over for Zamir White.
Yeah, it was over before it started, to be completely honest. I mean, for you and I, Jacob, we had him ranked
over for Zamir White. It
was over before it started. He'll have random good games when the Raiders are in it, and he can get a million carries, and they can milk a clock, and he'll fall into a few touchdowns. But you'll never know when to start him. He's going to have very few game scripts that are like that. He was outside the top 100 for Jacob and I. Wasn't anywhere near our rankings. There's just no point to Zamir White. I think he'll be cut soon from your fantasy roster.
Oh, he won't. No.
Yep.
No, he will not be. That's ridiculous. Well, I think Dan took it, Ben. Ben said, Adam, you got to go out with a terrible take.
So you think I took it? We can come back to this, Adam, and you might be right. But
cut. That's the thing. No one's cutting a starting running back.
He's not. How is he a starting running back though? When Jacob just said that he's splitting his carries with Alexander Mattison.
Splitting his carries.
He said he split his first down carries with Madison.
First down snaps. He didn't
snaps. That's even worse. He split his first down snaps.
Alexander Mattison had 5. Also, do you know who Alexander Mattison is? You're acting like Alexander Mattison.
No, it's not about that though. What really matters is that carries are worth almost nothing in fantasy. Carries
Isn't that the problem? Do you know who Alexander Mattison is? Yeah, and he's taking more snaps from Zamir White.
Look, I understand there are issues here. He's a flex. He's not going to get
a flex for you. You'd put him in your flex next week.
Maybe if he's playing the Panthers, that's it.
If he's playing the Panthers, sure. If he's playing a team the Raiders could actually beat or stay ahead of the whole game, then yes, I'm okay to flex him. He could fall into a touchdown.
Well, they play the Panthers in week 3, so he'll be
a flex for that week. But I won't. It's a bold take, and it may not happen. But I wouldn't be surprised if fantasy owners are releasing him at some point, or at least asking the question. There's almost no path forward for him.
Here's a terrible take for you. Fettuccine Alfredo. I can only have 3 or 4 bites, and then it's just way too heavy. Makes me a little nauseous. Yeah, right. Okay.
Fettuccine Alfredo. I don't think I have it very often for the same reason as you. Remember, I'm not great with dairy. That's just gonna put that out there.
All right, yeah. The ravioli and the cheese and all that.
Well, I went in that time. I had to get that sandwich. It looked so good.
All right, we got to go. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll talk to you tomorrow with the waiver wire on Fantasy Football Today.